What's up, everybody? This is Levi Caraway. That's Grayson Grundhoefer. Back by kind of popular demand. I know a lot of people are asking about this, so we're trying to do like a little quick hitters on Friday, Fast Friday, something like that. This will be our first time going into the TCU game, and we'll try to do it weekly if people enjoy it and like this type of content. So, Grayson, great to have you here, and let's just kind of start with something that happened this past weekend during the bye week was the commitment of four-star athlete Karice Hoy out of Frisco Lone Star. Can you kind of talk about him and what that means for Baylor?
I mean, it's a great start to the 2027 class. That's two four-star guys with him and Devontre Kirkland. I think that's one of the first places to start is just the momentum continues for Baylor on the recruiting trail. I mean, they continue to bring in these four-star guys. They continue to make guys priorities, and they continue to land those guys. I think that's really important. And when you look at the 2026 class and how it's been built, it's like, man, a lot of the guys they offered early, a lot of the guys they prioritized were the big name guys that they ended up being in on at the end. You know, when you look at guys like London Smith, Jamarian Vincent, Jamarian Carlton, like those type of guys, they recruited for 2 years, 3 years, and were able to land them. They did this same thing with Karice Hoy. It's kind of weird when you go back in time because, 2 years ago, a 2027 prospect, it's like, whoa, they're offering a 2027 guy or whatnot. But they would bring him in. They brought Jordan Deck in with him because they're teammates at Lone Star, Davian Gross as well. They brought those guys in on a lot of visits together. And so they were building those relationships and building that pipeline with Lone Star, which is one heck of a football program there in the Frisco area. I think all of that is great. And then you look at just what Karice has done. I mean, he was their quarterback last year and ran and threw the ball all over the place. Had over 4,000 yards of total offense, 55 touchdowns, was just a beast. I mean, put up huge numbers. And now this year, he's doing more stuff at running back, more things at wide receiver, playing a little bit more defense. And for Baylor's outlook, I mean, he is recruited as an athlete, but it very much seems like he's probably going to play receiver safety. I think those are the two areas that I look at the most. I think safety actually feels like where you'd like to see them turn one of these great athletes into a great safety because it's a huge area of need and a position they haven't recruited very well. So that would be awesome if he can turn into that. He does have some interceptions in his career, but so far a lot of the work he's done has been on the offensive side.
On Thursday morning, it was announced that what seemed to kind of was trending toward those true four-year seniors being able to get another year of eligibility, like Kobe Prentice, Cole Wilson. That was something that was kind of expected, and then it was announced that that's no longer going to be the case, at least for next year. Have there kind of any been recent recruiting developments where I saw a few wide receiver offers on Thursday morning go out? Is that because of that?
I think so. I think that that's what you're going to see is Baylor continuing to try to get these guys on the recruiting trail at the wide receiver position. I mean, they've really focused on that spot. And I think you really want to build a developmental pipeline to where you can just bring in high school recruits. Then you only have to fill in, one or two spots, especially at receiver. They've really had to bring in a lot of receivers because they just haven't had answers through recruiting, honestly. But I think the last two recruiting classes, you're starting to see a change in that. I do think those recent offers have a lot to do with that rule not passing, because if you look at Baylor's wide receiver core, what they could have returned, Kobe Prentice, Cole Wilson, I might be even missing one. There might be a third one that they could have brought back, but those two for sure could have come back, and now it doesn't look like they will be able to. So you can go out, use another spot on a receiver in the 2026 class. And then also, Baylor's going to probably bring in a transfer or two still, because it's just hard to rely on a bunch of young guys, especially in an offense that's so predicated by having good receiver play. And you can go into the portal and find these guys relatively easily, especially the slot type of guys. Baylor's really done a great job in that area with Ashton Hawkins, Cole Wilson, Kobe Prentice. It kind of been money on the guys that they've added at those spots in Jake Spavital's offense.
The Baylor's coming off the bye week. Dave Aranda's had a lot of success coming off bye weeks in his tenure. What are some of the main things you're looking for in this second half of this season?
I think the main things are kind of, you want to compare it to last year. I think it's very easy to do that. And it's hard to repeat that. Like what they did last year, they caught a lot of magic. They caught a lot of teams by surprise. They changed a few things here and there personnel-wise, specifically on the offensive line. And I think that helped. The cohesiveness up front was very apparent when they, put Sidney Fugar in there and just allowed him to be the starter the rest of the season. It changed their run game. It changed their offense for the better. Defensively for them, honestly, the only thing that really changed for them was they started forcing turnovers. I mean, they had a +8 turnover margin during that 6-game winning streak. That is phenomenal. They were -3 at the beginning of last year. This year, they're seeing it -4. So it's like, once again, if those turnovers shift, I mean, really, if you look back through this schedule so far, if the turnovers had shifted, Baylor would have beaten Kansas State by a little bit more. Baylor would have beaten Oklahoma State by a little bit more. Baylor would have won the Arizona State game. I mean, this team would be 5-1 at the moment because the Auburn game wasn't impacted by turnovers, even though you could point to, the Phoenix Jackson not jumping on the fumble as a potential area that could have swung the game. It's not really an area you can point to. They were beaten pretty squarely in the trenches. But the other games, man, if the turnover margin is in Baylor's favor, they probably win the game or they kind of run away with a few of those games. So that's one of the big areas. I think pressures turning to sacks is another one that we've talked about a lot. Baylor's at the middle of the pack in pressures, slightly above average. I think they're like 7th in the conference, but they're last in the conference in sacks. That's another area that could shift a little bit. And as we know, sacks and quarterback pressures can help lead to those turnovers. And so I think that's kind of, those two go hand in hand. I think those are the two biggest areas. I think the last one is maybe this offense going from a top 25 offense to an elite offense. I don't think they've been elite so far this year. I think they've been really good. If they take that next step forward, it could be massive. And I think the area that it needs to improve in order to take that step forward is the run game. And I think this weekend is a big opportunity for that.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity this weekend in Fort Worth with the pair of kind of restless fan bases facing off against their rivals. It's going to be a really important game, obviously, for both sides. But let's talk about Baylor specifically. How much does the season outlook change with a win versus a loss this weekend? And how important of a statement is this for Dave Aranda?
Man, Aranda and the fan base really need this game, right? I just think this is how you build trust with a fan base. Besides winning at home, it's beating your rivals. And Baylor's had so little success in this rivalry for the last 10 years. They've only won twice in the last 10 years. And so shifting that would be big. I've also mentioned this a few times this week, but it's like, man, even when Baylor's had great teams, TCU has played them really close. And Baylor has not pulled away in many of these games. I think the stat that I looked at was, since, I guess, the last time Baylor won this game by more than 6 points was 1994. Like, they have not blown this game wide open. TCU has a few times. They've blown out Baylor. But in general, these games have been close when Baylor has won. And I just think the fan base really needs this. And as far as what's in front of them, man, winning this game matters more than beating Cincinnati. It just does. Like, it matters more to the fan base. Like, if you could pick one to win, it would be this one for sure. But if they lose this one, it makes that Cincinnati game kind of a must win if you want to have any hope. It completely eliminates them from the Big 12 championship in my eyes if they lose both these games. But if you lose this one and win the Cincinnati game, you're still on track a little bit. You still have opportunities in front of you. But if they lose both games, they're going to be fighting for a bowl game. I mean, it just is what it is. They'd be 4-4 and then having to look at a schedule that features Utah. You still got to match up against a tough Arizona team on the road. You still got to beat Houston, which is an in-state matchup. Homecoming against UCF. Who knows there? These games are very important. And so if you lose this one, it puts a lot of pressure on you the rest of the season. And it would just make things a little bit tough. And same with TCU, honestly. If they lose this game, man, their schedule is brutal. They're going to have to really fight to try to make a bowl game and to try to, honestly, for Sonny Dykes to kind of build trust again with the fan base. They're going to have to play really well if they lose this one.
Yeah, I agree. So let's start with where this game might be won. Kind of talking about the star signal callers for both teams. What are you expecting from Josh Hoover and Sawyer Robertson?
I mean, it's pretty crazy, right? Sawyer Robertson leads the nation in passing touchdowns and passing yards. Josh Hoover is second in both of those categories. So both have lived up to the hype statistically. But both their teams have kind of been a little disappointing. I think it's not so much the record, it's more so how the teams have looked, right? And I think that's the difference, right? 4-2, okay, it's fine. Both these teams have played some good teams, but I think the way they've looked has been a little disappointing. And I think if you look at the advanced numbers, both these guys have obviously played well on the stat sheet. But when you look at PFF grades, when you look at turnover worthy throws, when you look at kind of just deeper than just those numbers, both these guys still have kind of a level that they need to reach this year. And both have an opportunity to I think, take their game to another level. But a big part of it is really, can either of these teams' run games get going? Like we saw Sawyer last year, he had the best QBR in the Big 12, top 5 QBR in the nation. Hasn't been there this year because they haven't been able to run the ball. And so you're forcing him to have to throw the ball a ton, which means his efficiency is going to go down a little bit. The big plays can sometimes go down a little bit. The turnover worthy plays are going to go up a little bit. Both of them really just need a run game to kind of help them, and maybe a little bit more from their defenses, especially on the Baylor side of things. But they both have great matchups this week against the opposing defense. I mean, TCU's defense is hemorrhaging yards and touchdowns to quarterbacks. 4 straight games, they've given up at least 3 touchdowns to the opposing quarterback. Meanwhile, Baylor's given up 290 passing yards 3 times this year. And I wouldn't necessarily say that they've played a gauntlet of quarterbacks. I mean, they faced a lot of dual threat guys, but not really guys who are throwing it all over the place. This is the toughest matchup they've had all year from a pure receiver quarterback dynamic. It's going to be very difficult for the secondary, and they're finally going to get really, really tested in this one. So both should play really well in my eyes, and I do think whichever quarterback plays better will probably win the game.
Aside from the quarterback battle and honestly Baylor secondary, because we know that's going to be a tough matchup, is there anything you're gonna watch closely for this weekend?
The trenches. And this is honestly more so for Baylor than I think it is for TCU. But let's start with Baylor's offensive line. I think that TCU's run defense has been pretty fraudulent this year. They're 7th in the Big 12 in rushing yards allowed this season per game, but they haven't played anyone that can run the ball at all. And, Baylor walks in and they're kind of in that same group, right? Kansas State, Colorado, North Carolina would all be in the bottom half of the Big 12, as well as SMU. They'd all be outside the top 12 in rushing yards per game. And that's who TCU's played this year. Baylor is kind of right around that same area, but I think we all feel like Baylor has more upside in the run game going forward, especially with Bryson Washington, one of the best running backs in the Big 12. So if that turns around, that would be huge for Baylor. And if this offense line can play better than they have in the early part of this season, that could help a lot. I think getting Omar Igbedian back, them getting a little bit healthier there should help that. But we'll see. It's to be determined. So that's definitely going to be an area I'm watching. And then, of course, on the other side, it's Baylor's defensive line versus a beat-up TCU offensive line. They got 2 offensive linemen who are questionable for this game. They've played 5 games in a row. Baylor's coming off a bye week. Like, this just feels like Baylor's defense line when you look at Jackie Marshall, Cooper Lands, Devontae Tizino, Matthew Fobbs-White, Amarian Winston. Like, these guys need to win individual matchups. I don't feel like they've done that this year enough. And so this feels like an opportunity for that, given that TCU's dealing with some injuries and they've had to play so many games in a row. I think they're going to be a little bit beaten up going into this game.
Yeah, speaking of injuries, let's talk about Baylor's injuries. Looks like Bryson Washington's going to be probable. Like you said, Omar's going to be probable. How are things kind of developing with Tevin Williams, who's been Baylor's star corner this year, and what's kind of the deal with Carl Williams?
Yeah, so starting with Tevin, I know he was a surprise to some people. I'd mentioned it quite a bit this week on the premium side of things that I felt like he was going to miss some time, and obviously he's listed as doubtful. I don't think he's playing this week. I would be pretty stunned. I don't necessarily, I'm not expecting him to play really probably till the bye week is kind of my current expectations on that. We'll see, though. I think this is probably some gamesmanship, putting him as doubtful instead of out, but I would be very surprised if he played. As far as the other ones, Carl Williams, not surprised he's out. It very much seems like Baylor is taking the approach of we're going to wait till he's 100% before playing him. You just got to wait until he's back because his confidence is just going to get shot if you keep playing him at 70, 80%. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to do that. I also think there's a scenario where maybe they could redshirt him as well. He hasn't played in a lot of games this year. He never used his red shirt. I think it kind of makes sense. And I know everyone's been disappointed in him, and I understand all that, but I think this is one of those situations where you kind of got to trust the staff and be like, they took him to Big 12 media days. They've put him out there and said he's going to be one of our best defensive players. They're so high on him every time they talk about him. It's hard for me to believe that he is not a really impactful football player. But I do think in order for him to get playing to that level, you got to get him healthy. And so I think redshirting him would actually make a lot of sense. Who knows? Maybe he comes back earlier than that, and maybe he's someone you can't keep off the field. But I think until he's back and fully ready to go, it's going to be hard to play him. The other one I'll mention is, Michael Turner's listed as questionable as well. That was kind of a surprise one that popped up. It'd be nice if he was okay, because you're kind of hoping that he and Caden Knighton can take just a baby step jump after the bye week and maybe get a little more comfortable and potentially look better when Bryson Washington isn't out there, because I think we need to see growth from both of them to have a lot of confidence in what they have behind Bryson Washington, who's been very banged up this year.
Yep. And then last question before I get you out of here. What's kind of your prediction? I know it's Thursday afternoon, but what are you thinking right now?
I think that this is going to be a battle. And I've been back and forth on whether I think this is just going to be a complete over type game. The number's at 65.5. I think everyone expects them to score a lot of points in this game. I also know it's a rivalry game, and so a lot of things can kind of go sideways and things can be pretty wacky. I think it's going to be right around that number. Maybe a little bit over would be the side that I lean on. I think ultimately Baylor getting the bye week, TCU being on this stretch of having to play all these games in a row, Baylor having an opportunity to get things right, whereas TCU is just kind of, this is another game week for them. They just have to get ready and prepare, doing many of the same things they've been doing this year. So I think that gives Baylor a slight edge in this game. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a very close one. I'm going to take Baylor to win this game, but I think it's going to be an absolute battle. I'm going to put it somewhere around the score of like 37, 33, 38, 35, somewhere in that range.
Cool. Well, thanks, Grayson. This has kind of been a quick hitters on Friday, our first version. Hopefully we can do this a lot more moving forward. But anyway, this has been Levi Caraway. If y'all want to check out Sikkim 365 Premium, we have all the staff predictions up on Friday morning and the game thread and stuff like that. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Join Sikkim 365 Premium on a $1 for 1 month trial to read our experts' notes and insights. Know about high school commits, off-season transfers, coaching staff changes, and so much more before the rest. Also, download the Sikkim 365 app on your iPhone today to get instant notifications of breaking news, read up on the latest inside info, easily interact with other Baylor fans on our forums, and get alerts for anything published by your favorite staff members.